So what we're going to do first is do a preliminary walkthrough of some of the frequently made mistakes that I've seen pop up with assignment 1B. This is by no means comprehensive. This is just things I've seen so far from people whose code I've reviewed, but this may help you avoid getting stuck when you're doing your solution. So first of all, make sure that you use cancelable lock as the field type for your spin lock in the HashMap manager, Palantir manager code. Don't use reentrant spin lock, use cancelable lock. That's the interface that reentrant spin lock, or spin lock for that matter, implement. So make sure you do that, otherwise you're going to get weird errors, because it's always a good idea to use the interface or the superclass as opposed to an implementation or a subclass as the type of the lock, because that gives you more flexibility in terms of what you would put in there if you wanted to change the implementation somehow. A couple of common problems I've seen in build model: make sure that you make the semaphore fair as opposed to not fair, and also make sure you give it the right count. It should be the Palantir count, not some other count. Let's take a look at some problems with unlock. I guess actually this should go, this really is actually from the spin lock class. So it probably needs to go up here, strictly speaking. And this code is incorrect. This is the grad student version. This is the version that's the reentrant spin lock and the unlock. So what you need to do for the grad student version is you need to make sure that you check to see if the current owner of the lock is the thread that's calling the unlock method. And if it's not, then that's an illegal monitor state exception. And then you have to do some other checks. This code has just a lot of extra stuff in it that is not needed, and it's just extra work and inefficient. So too much complexity going on here. Let's now go down and take a look at some problems with acquire. So there's a lot of different ways to do acquire, but there's some things you need to make sure that you do correctly. First of all, you need to make sure that you acquire the semaphore. So let me put that in here. This code probably did that, but make sure to acquire the semaphore before going any further. And then down here, don't put the lock call inside the try block. You want to put the lock call outside or above the try finally block. Because otherwise, if it fails, you're going to end up trying to release a lock that has not been correctly locked. So you have no idea what state it's in. So that would be a problem. Also, this is passing the wrong parameter, just giving a false, which is the wrong thing to do. What you want to do is you want to pass in the isCanceled method reference. And if you look at Piazza, I explain what you need to do to make that work. So you have to pass in the isCanceled method reference in its non-static syntactic form. So think about that. And what that's doing, by the way, is it's allowing the spin lock implementation to check to see if the lock has been canceled or the program has been canceled, in which case it should not block or spin, it should return. A lot of problems here. This is common mistakes. These are really more about efficiency issues than anything else, but don't use get Palantir or don't use key set, use entry set. An entry set is a factory method defined on a hash map that returns a series of map.entry objects that have set and get methods, set value, set key, get key, and so on. And that's what you want to do. You want to use a for each loop that will go through and check to see whether there's any map entry that is available, meaning that its value is available. I'll let you figure out what that means. And if it is available, then you want to go ahead and set it to in use, which I'll let you figure out how to do with the set value method. And so you'll use get value and set value. And that is way more efficient than what's being done here. What is wrong with this code? Well, there's lots of things wrong with this code. First of all, you don't need to use contains key. Contains key does a hash map and a hash map lookup, And we don't want to do that. We're just iterating through the elements in the map using the map entries. So it's basically a linear search. And there's no need to use contains key because we're going to figure out whether we found one. If we get all the way to the end of the loop and we never got a hit, then we know that we don't have what we're looking for. So we don't need to use contains key. And you also don't want to be using get and put on the map because get and put do hash lookups. And we don't want to be doing hash lookups. Hash lookups are much more inefficient relative to what we're doing here, which is just doing a linear search through the elements in the map, finding what we're looking for one that's available. So don't use get and put on the hash map. Don't use contains key on the hash map. Instead, iterate through the map entries in the maps entry set and then use the various set and get methods defined on map entry to do the thing. Now, there is a way to do this efficiently with Java streams, but you really have to know what you're doing. And so if you don't feel comfortable with that, don't use Java streams. A simple for each loop will do the trick just nicely. Down here, same problem, passing the wrong value to map lock. And this code has a whole bunch of other problems. It uses key set. You don't want to use key set. You want to use entry set, as I just said. You don't want to be using get or replace. And you also don't want to be putting the try finally block here. This code needs to be refactored. The finally block that does the unlock needs to be moved to the end of the loop. So it needs to be at the very end. So you need to have a try finally block around the loop from here, try, blah, 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 down to the end where the finally would go. Blah, blah, blah. So I'll let you figure out the syntax for that, but that's putting things in the wrong place, and it's using get and replace where it shouldn't. And then for definitely, don't call release at the end of the acquire method on the semaphore, because that's defeating the whole purpose of having a semaphore. You want to have that semaphore held until the application code, which in our case is the thing that's acquiring the Palantir and gazing, is done with its gaze, and it's going to call release, which will trigger the method we're going to look at next. So under no circumstances should you call release inside of acquire. That's releasing the semaphore, that is, inside the acquire method for the hash map manager here. That would be horrible. So let's take a look at some issues with release. Again, you don't need to call contains key. There's no need to do that. Also, you need to make sure that you don't pass the wrong value to lock. You should be passing in the isCanceled method reference for all uses of the cancelable lock. And then here's a bunch of subtleties down here. So what needs to happen, first of all, you need to have a try finally block again, because you want to make sure that you always unlock the lock in the finally portion. That's just a good habit to get into. If you watch the videos, or as we talk about this stuff, you'll see that you always want to make sure that you unlock locks that are fully bracketed locks inside of the finally portion of a try finally block. And again, make sure you don't put the try statement up here. It goes after you acquire the lock. And then there's a bunch of other subtleties here. When you call put or you call replace, you can call either one. They do the same thing for the purposes of this assignment. You need to make sure you check the return value that comes back from put or replace. And I recommend stashing it in a local Boolean variable. And what will happen here is what you get back from put needs to be checked, and checked carefully. There are three different values that could come back from put or replace. You could get back Boolean true, you could get back Boolean false, or you could get back null. And you only want to release the semaphore if the value you get back from put or replace is Boolean false, not Boolean true or not null. So what I do is I call replace, but you can call put also, stash the value aside in a local Boolean variable. And then in the finally block, after I unlock the lock, then I go ahead and I conditionally release the semaphore if the return value that came back from put or replace had the right value. And if it doesn't have the right value, I don't release it, because that means something has gone horribly wrong and your program's in big trouble. And in that case, you throw an illegal state exception, illegal argument exception. Okay, so those are some of the things that we had here for the frequently made mistakes for assignment 1B. Keep in mind there will be many more of these things as we get the submissions and I have a chance to review them in more detail. But I wanted you to get the gist of it now so that when you're doing your solution, you can make sure you fix these problems.